loving and supporting their husbands, and I am one of them. My name is Elizabeth Schuyler Hamilton, and I am glad to finally have the honor to share my story. I was born on August 9th in 1757 in Albany, New York, as the second daughter of General Philip Schuyler and Catherine Van Rensselaer, some of the wealthiest and politically influential families in New York. I grew up in the Schuyler mansion with 14 siblings in my family, 17 of which made it to adulthood. And despite the dangers and unrest of the French and Indian War, I had a relatively comfortable childhood, being taught how to read and sew by my mother. When I was a young girl, I was able to meet Benjamin Franklin because he stayed with us for a brief amount of time while I was traveling. And throughout my life, friends and acquaintances remarked that I was a bright character with depth, warmth, and a strong will. In the year 1780, I had been staying with my Aunt Gertrude in Morristown, New Jersey, where I met the man that would soon become my husband, Alexander Hamilton, who was camping in the town along with George Washington and his men. Our relationship furthered even after he left Morristown for a small amount of time in order to negotiate prisoner exchanges, as well as letters flew swiftly between us. Whilst in Morristown, I met and became friends with Martha Washington, a relationship that the two of us would be able to maintain throughout our husbands' political careers. And in April of 1780, we were engaged with my father's blessing. In June, Alexander and the men in Morristown left, but we were able to keep communication up through the loving letters that continued to flow between us. Yet we were at last married in the Schuyler mansion on December 14th that same year. Alexander returned to the army in January 1781, and soon I was able to join him in New Windsor, where the army was now stationed. I rekindled my friendship with Martha as we entertained our husbands' fellow officers. Soon, however, the unfortunate event of Alexander and Washington's falling out forced us to move. First, we had headed back down to my father's house in Albany, and then to a new home across the river from the New Windsor headquarters. There, I had busied myself trying to make a home for us and aiding Alexander in his political writings. Parts of his 31-page letter to Robert Morris, laying out much of the important financial knowledge that would aid him later in his political career, had been in my handwriting. I moved back in with my father for a period of time as Alexander rejoined Washington and the army. He wrote many letters telling me not to worry for him and his safety, and sent secret plans from the army, including the lead up to the Battle of Yorktown in that autumn. After Yorktown, we rejoined in Albany, where we had stayed for 2 years, and moved into New York City in 1783. Many people had known me for my bravery and kind heart, and a man by the name of Ralph Earl came to know this too in 1787. Earl was a painter that had been stuck in debtor's prison. Alexander had heard of his predicament and asked if I would be willing to sit and have my portrait done so he could make some money to eventually buy his way out of prison. Happily, I agreed, and Earl was able to leave prison on April 14th, 1788. In 1747, an affair had come to light between Alexander and a young woman named Maria Reynolds, leaving me in utter disbelief. She had first approached him for monetary need in the summer of 1791, and I could not believe the charges that had stood against my husband of speculation when I had first heard of them. It left me pained and angry thinking of him as a scoundrel. On August 25th, 1797, he had published a paper that would later be known as the Reynolds pamphlet, admitting to his one-year affair in order to refute the charges that he had been involved in speculation and public misconduct with Maria's husband, James Reynolds. I had stayed with my parents in Albany after this and had only returned to my husband because the local doctor was unable to cure my son Philip from typhus. Over time, I had forgiven him and we had remained married. But our son Philip did not live much longer after taking part in a duel and being shot and killed in November 24th, 1801. In 1802, we had a house built for the family called Hamilton Grange, but unfortunately, Alexander did not have much time to spend with me together in the Grange. For only 2 years later, Alexander was taken from this world after partaking in his infamous duel with Aaron Burr, causing his untimely death. Before his death, he wrote to me 2 letters. one saying, "The consolations of religion, my beloved, can alone support you, and these you have a right to enjoy. Fly to the bosom of your God and be comforted. With my last idea, I shall cherish the sweet hope of meeting you in a better world. Adieu, the best of wives and best of women. Embrace all of my darling children for me." I did grieve for a time, but I was able to pick myself up and carry on, and I had dedicated the rest of my life to preserving my family's legacy. I was also left to deal with my husband's debt and was forced to sell our home. Later, though, I was able to repurchase it at only half the price due to the kind hearts of his executors, who decided that I should not be publicly dispossessed of our home. My children and I sorted through my husband's papers, writings, and wrote and published a biography for him. I even wore one of his letters to me in a pouch around my neck to keep it close to me. And in 1806, I, along with several other women, founded the Orphan Asylum Society, where I was appointed vice president, and in 1821, I was made the president of the said group and served as such for 27 years, raising more than 700 children before moving to Washington, D.C., and helping raise money for the Washington Monument before my death on November 9th, 1854, at the age of 97. I now lay peacefully in Trinity Church Graveyard in New York City. I had spent so much time preserving my own family's legacy and telling their stories that I never had the time to tell my own, and I'm thankful that it finally has.